Welcome to Learn to Build a Business podcast, the show that brings you insights, stories, and strategies from those who've made the leap from working professionals to successful entrepreneurs. With your host, Rey Ortega.
Welcome to Learn to Build a Business podcast, where we teach tips, tricks, and insights on how to build a business when you're starting working at a company and trying to create your own company and transition to be your own boss. I have a guest today, a special guest that I was on his podcast recently. His name's Lee Murray. He has a media content agency focused on creating and distributing content for all kinds of businesses. He's also the host of the Explorin Growth Podcast, which again is a podcast that I was just on recently. Really glad to have you on, Lee. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting.
It's great, and I loved being on your podcast. We had a really good conversation about. Originally, it was supposed to be about business, but then we actually kind of migrated over into AI, which I saw that you had just recently posted that. So.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, awesome, man. For all the people that are listening right now, I really want you to understand, but know who Lee is. Lee, why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about what you do and what your business is all about?
Yeah, sure. So, today all businesses need content and they need a content strategy. And, so what we do is we work with marketing leaders, sales leaders to support their marketing and sales goals. So we will help companies and brands create video content, written content, and then depending on how much they need to outsource, sometimes we can take over for the distribution part of it as well.
Okay, that's awesome. And as far as everyone knows, content is king right now, right? You have to have good content on your website, or else not just your website, but on your social media, or else it's kind of hard to even show yourself out there. Talk a little bit about the current industry trends. Like right now, what is really necessary for a business?
Well, I'm a little bit kind of biased on strategy. I think that we work with a lot of mid-tier B2B companies. And what I've found is that a lot of those marketing leaders are not as savvy as you might find marketing leaders with B2C or e-commerce, direct-to-consumer type companies. Because with all of the B2C side, you have to really know your analytics. You have to know your tools. You're in the trenches every single day. You're creating, A to Z tests. You're really trying to experiment. You have to be creative, to get people's attention on the front end of the funnel, and then all the way through to convert them, right? But on the B2B side, it's not as intensive. So, typically you run into someone who is, maybe has a good eye for design and they may have a branding bent. Or maybe if you're lucky, has a sales background. And so they understand hey, we need content that will support sales, which is great. That's what B2B is all about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say strategy, because when I'm talking to these typically marketing leaders, they've tried a lot of things. Some things have worked, some things haven't. And they're not really sure where to put the next foot in front of the next one. So, just stepping back and saying, okay, let's forget about kind of what you've done in the past and let's look at your audience and see where can we step in front of them and add a lot of value, and then talk about tools and tactics and all the platforms and everything.
Yeah.
I think that helps them tremendously to have a cohesive view about what they should be doing. And then they, downstream of that, you talk about the tools and tactics and platforms and all of the things that you do day to day. But yeah, so I'm a little bit partial, because I think if you talk to anyone else, they're probably going to go right into the trenches of, how to run Facebook ads and, more effectively, or how to be more tactical. And tactics are great, but I think you have to have a bigger focus on what is the long view of what you're trying to do with your total audience and your target audience. How can you bring them the most amount of value over time?
Yeah.
What's your role as not only the marketer leading the brand, but the brand itself? And how can you support sales? Because honestly, sales is typically, when you talk B2B, is typically the front, pointing into the spear. The brand and the marketing are there to support or serve that fast food. Actually, I had I think I had a full episode with some marketers that I met on LinkedIn where we talked about, can you build a business without social media? And, it's just this question, like, let's discuss it. And really, it's kind of a broad question that I think you could debunk pretty quickly when you start on the B2C side, because you have to build your brand out in front of people, and it has to be a lot of awareness. But on the B2B side, you really, people forget there are tons of companies right now who don't even know what Facebook is. They don't even have a Facebook account. And they are, multi-million-dollar company that have a high value in an investor's mind. So you very much can build a company without social media, without, I wouldn't say maybe without a website, but without all the stuff that everybody said you need. But with that said, depending on the type of company you are, if you want to be a market leader, and if you want to control, maybe control is not the right word, but if you want to lead that narrative of what's happening in the industry and be seen as that quintessential thought leader, then you have to create content in some form, and you have to put it in front of your prospective buyers for them to consume.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know we talked about when I was a guest on your podcast, we had talked about how I started that company basically with no marketing. We just did calls and emails, right?
That's
and we built $1 million business off of that. Mm-hmm. And it's only when we decided to go high growth, when we wanted to really get ourselves out there, we started incorporating social media and all of those platforms. But what you said earlier, I think is super important, is like at the beginning, it's more than just the tactical. It's really difficult. I know a lot of people, in fact, I was on a conference call earlier today where they're not a content creation company, but another social media marketing company, right? And the guy was explaining how there's so many social media marketing companies out there now. Everyone's spinning one up because they think it's that easy. You just do Facebook ads, money's going to come in the door. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more to what goes on. Everything from the creatives that you create, which you guys do a lot of that, right? Mm-hmm. And then even how the copy works and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more involved than just saying, hey, I'm just going to throw up some Facebook ads or Google ads.
So much more involved. And I would underscore that, just to kind of reiterate that first point, that if you're an ice cream shop, you need to get foot traffic in your door, right, to buy ice cream, unless you have some kind of delivery at home subscription business or something, right? Yeah. That's a completely different business that has to be marketed completely different than a software company, right? Software company, you can send some clever cold emails, and you can pick up the phone, and you could even stop by and probably win a few accounts. Yeah. And yet you probably have to support that with some kind of meaningful content strategy on the back end to keep, have sustainability and long-term growth and all that. But for that ice cream shop, or if you want to take it online for that Etsy shop, they have to understand their customer in a similar way, but they have to now put those ads in front of where their customer is, which is going to be on the scroll. It's on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, maybe even. And so then that's where you do have to be, you do have to know your stuff tactically, but you can't forget that there is a bigger picture here of how to, number one, have a competitive advantage and know what it is, but then articulate that clearly to your audience so that they can quickly, and what we're really talking about here is messaging, so they can quickly understand how you're different and if it fits in their world. Yeah.
And then good point. And I want to just reiterate what you're saying there, because for those that are listening or watching, Learn to Build a Business, as I've told you, Learn to Build a Business, we're all about transitioning from working and trying to build your own business, become your own boss, start your own company. Mm-hmm. So those listening, it's a good point to understand, because I know some of y'all are going to start a business, and you may have a traditional business, or you may have more of a digital business. Mm-hmm. And both of those have different strategies. They're not the same strategy. And so someone likely could come in and help you with determining which is the right strategy in order for you to grow your business or get your business out there. And by the way, both strategies require media. Let's just be clear on that. Like, both strategies require media. Just because you're traditional doesn't mean you throw media out the window. There's other ways that you have to use the media in order to be able to get traction.
That's right. And I would also too, I try to keep as time goes on and these tools evolve and there's the latest, greatest thing that comes up, try to keep a wide sort of practical view on the past. And so I'm not saying like, I won't be the first one to tell you that billboards are out, bus ads are out, flyers are out. Nothing is out. It really comes down to, where are these small to large marketplaces and or traffic centers that your audience is frequenting, and where you could be seen. Maybe it's a kiosk in a mall. It depends. I think that when you find these, you know your customer, and you find out where they're going, you see where you could get their attention, then you look at the value of what it costs to get in front of them. That's the business decision you have to make from a marketing investment standpoint. But, when you talk about media, the way I think about it is, yes, for sure, Facebook ads and YouTube pre-roll and all that. But I also think about it as a flyer. If you have like in our town, in DeLand, Florida, we love our Christmas parades and dog parades, and like it's still it's an old school town, and we have parades. And every time I go to these, I look around and see so many missed opportunities. Now, not that I'm saying every business should be handing out flyers, but I look at it like there's a sandwich shop there on the main strip, and I always think, here is the twice a year where you have 10,000 people, or I don't know how many thousands of people that are lined up on the street right in front of you. Talking about foot traffic that's static. What could you do at this point to let people know that you are right behind them? And hey, when they leave and they go on about their year, they should come back. But I see all these small businesses, they just pretty much close their door and they don't do anything. And I think you're missing such a big opportunity. There's a creative way to do it tastefully, whether you're in the parade or you hand a flyer or you give a free hot dog or whatever you do. There's a way for you to capitalize on that. And I think that's a very practical, like, put your hands on example that can be extrapolated. It can be a sort of maybe even a metaphor for the e-commerce business or the B2B business or whatever other business. It's about who is your customer? And first of all, who are they? Where are they? And what was it going to cost me to get in front of them? And when I'm in front of them, what am I going to say that's appealing enough that is going to catch their attention and get them to do something? That's marketing, right? It's really that simple. So it could be a flyer, it could be a Facebook ad. It could be something even more advanced.
Now, you mentioned you're in DeLand, which is a smaller market area. Yeah. So I guess my question to you, and maybe for the viewers, maybe you could tell a little bit about your story of like, how did you hole up in DeLand for your business, and how do you because a lot of people think small market, there's not enough money in this area. How do you combat that?
Well, it's all about. I think that's a great question, because if your audience is listening to this is someone that's I'm asking you too, is there someone working a full-time job, they're looking to go out on their own, right? When you're looking at the business that you're going to be in, and then you're looking at subsequently the customers or clients that you would serve, don't necessarily look at it with boundaries. Think about it broadly and think, okay, can I deliver this service virtually? If I can, then I have no boundaries. It's almost a global market, barring language and that kind of thing. Well, that's kind of maybe too big of a start. So let's zero that in. Maybe it's the U.S. Maybe we're in Florida. Maybe it's Orlando. Maybe it's my small town. But I don't really like to think in terms of geography, unless geography is an asset or something I can leverage.
Like Disney.
Yeah.
Disney, that right now, in Orlando, the geography, it lends well to tourists, right? That's
right.
So that,
like right now, I have a CEO series on my podcast, and I'm doing it just with Central Florida CEOs. So I'm leveraging the geography to my benefit, because, local CEOs are going to hear stories from other local CEOs, because there's not a lot of avenues that allow them to do that. So, there's an advantage there in the market that I can leverage to moving forward. But that's a very traditional and it's a traditional way of looking at it, saying, okay, if I live in DeLand, are there enough clients to support my business? Well, you have to think like that if you're a local ice cream shop. I was looking at a florist company not too long ago, because every once in a while I'll go online and see what businesses are for sale. And I found one. I started kind of analyzing it. And I thought, okay, it's here in DeLand. And I thought, okay, this business could do so much better for all these reasons. And they could be the best florist in DeLand to start. And then once they kind of achieve that milestone, they could easily go beyond DeLand with deliveries, subscriptions, and other things, right? So you really have to start first with your business model and say, what business am I in? Who am I serving? And how's that interaction? What does that look like? How are we transacting? For me personally, I started my business. We lived in Ormond Beach for about 6 years. And I had a client over there that was nearby, just happened to be nearby. And then I had 2 or 3 clients in DeLand.
Mm-hmm.
And they came word of mouth, sort of how it goes. And so I was driving to DeLand a lot. And when we got to the point where we're like, hey, we were renting at the time, we wanted to buy a house, we started looking at DeLand. I said, hey, well, it makes sense. I mean, I got a bunch of clients over here. So it sort of factored into where we moved. But as time went on, I opened up my net. I've had clients all over the US, but as my business evolved and the model of how I was taking my business to market evolved, as it does, I thought, I don't really want to be on planes anymore. I just am getting old, I guess. I don't know, but I don't really care about all the traveling, and it takes away from time from the family and all that. So why don't I just carve out my business here in Orlando? There's plenty of business to go around. And I could live wherever because I can work out of my office, which is attached to my house. And that's kind of how I made my decision. So I think that it's one answer of maybe 50 answers that, you ask 50 people, you probably get 50 different answers. But I think it really comes down to business model, which is knowing, how to serve your clients best.
Yeah. No, and I understand. And I worked for a company in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and this was like almost 20 years ago. And Fort Wayne, Indiana wasn't as popular. It was a very, very small town. And, but the company was a multi-million, like a $70 million company. And it was because they did exactly what you said. Like they did not think of only servicing their town. They service people globally. And that's where that's where I got most of my phone sales chops, by the way, because that's what we did. We called thousands of people a year. I had a client list of 3,000 people, and none of them lived in that town. And it was like, that's just how they did it. So I definitely see the potential. And that's why I wanted to ask that question, because some people may be thinking, I don't know if in a small town I can make it. Right.
It can be a barrier to taking that next step, whether you're researching or, trying to start your business. Look around and, if there are viable businesses that could fit your ideal target, that you're going for, then sure. I mean, work with them. But, that's not necessarily always the case. I see a lot of businesses. I mean, now with the internet and Zoom, I mean, you can really kind of open up a shop doing whatever, wherever, and be successful.
Absolutely. You said this one part that I was really, I wanted to touch on. You were talking about looking at businesses to buy, which is totally a valid way to get into business to begin with. Right? Because some people, I know in my world, the tech world, people go like, oh man, I want to be like Facebook, or I want to be like these large, unicorns. And the reality is like, you can make an absolute decent living just buying a business that currently exists and kind of building off of that. And so how is your journey into looking at buying a business? Have you really dug into it, or you're just kind of kicking the tires right now?
Kicking the tires. I'm easily distracted, and I've found that's been my one downfall over the many years. And so I'm trying to do better about that these days, where I will curb myself from even looking at that stuff. And even, I'll look at it from time to time, but it's more of a reward than it is something that I do for like analyzing for some sake. I have certain, now milestones in my business I'm trying to hit. And once I hit those, then I can reward myself by actually looking at new opportunities. So that's something I think is very valid for people to understand, that there's so many things to learn, so much information out there. But you have to sort of walk through it to gain the wisdom and experience for yourself. And there are a lot of distractions along the way, because being very finally focused on what it is you're doing and growing that one thing is a very difficult pursuit.
I was just interested in the fact that you were looking to buy.
Oh, right.
Because I got into this buy then build. I don't know if you heard of that guy who built. There's a book called Buy Then Build.
Yeah,
and that's when you started talking about that. I started thinking about that because that's I've been
so
reading this book. Yeah,
I do have something to say about that. I think for people who are listening to this, that I've worked with a lot of business leaders, CEOs, COOs, CFOs, and I've gotten to see entrepreneurs, investors. I've gotten to see that people do well and people make mistakes, and I've said a lot of myself. And I would say that some people are good at the process of buying a business, but they're not good at running it. Some people are good at starting a business, but they're not good at buying one. And maybe there's probably 4 or 5 other different flavors in there. I mean, if some people really just need to be investors, but not CEOs, like you can kind of go down the list. Trying to understand who you are in that mix is going to be difficult from the sidelines. You have to really just start a business, buy a business, invest in a business, whichever one you think is your path, to know. And there will be mistakes along the way. Some, most of them hopefully small, but you have to walk down that path to really know which of those people you are and have enough awareness to accept it. For a long time, I thought I was an entrepreneur, and it was really part of my identity. Like I want to be this person so bad. And this is even before being an entrepreneur was cool. Like before there was really any content about being an entrepreneur. This is like 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is my path. This is what I want to do. And I'm very, I'm very curious, right? Which is exploring growth. That's why I have my podcast, and it's sort of scratching that itch.
Yeah.
But what I've realized over the last 20 years is that what I'm actually really good at is consulting. Because I'm really good at listening to where someone is in a place, wherever they may be, breaking down the problem that they have and building up a solution that can take them to the next phase, whether it's the next step or the next stage of business, whatever. So that's been kind of wild to undo that part of my personality, that part of my identity, that I thought I was this big, I was going to be this big entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But when I look around and I see actual entrepreneurs, that it really is part of their DNA. They're not just reading books about it and saying that they are, but they can't help but start things that are successful. So that's been kind of wild to untangle that from my identity, but at the same time, embrace the part of me that I am really good at and really and do enjoy. But I would say alongside all of that, what I've tried to do is stay, grounded and stay really attuned to the actual practical operating of a business, which is why I have the agency. So, if I determine that I'm so great at consulting, why not just go and be a consultant, right? Well,
yeah.
For me, in my inner workings, for me to be able to sleep at night, I need to go and produce something for clients and operate a successful business to whatever degree, in order for me to feel confident and valid in the things that I'm telling someone to do. Now, the things I'm telling someone to do may not be exactly what I did in my business, meaning it may not be the same business, it may not be the same, everything. But since I went and I actually walked through that fire and came out on the other side, well, the conversations that we're going to have over here is more peer-to-peer and valid versus me just sitting on the sidelines and reading all these things and talking to people, but not really getting my hands dirty. So, not everybody's wired the same way, but that's just for me. That's how I have to operate.
Yeah. And it totally makes sense. I hear exactly what you're saying, because I did have a question I wanted to ask you. Do you find yourself being the more tactical or the more theoretical when it comes to your business?
Well, when I have the right team in place, of course, the strategy part comes pretty natural to me. I love to see it in execution.
Yeah.
So I stick. This is why I kind of started by saying I have a bent really more towards strategy, right? Which is my first answer, but I kind of stick around. I like to sit around the strategy level because then I think it allows me to push down the strategy, the plan into actual tactics that we're going to execute on, and then receive that feedback and know what to do with it to optimize it and make it better for the outcome that we're working towards, the goal. But also for the edification of the team, so that the team is seeing that, okay, the person that we are actually, doing this with or for is thinking about us in terms of during the process of iterating and optimizing, not just throwing spaghetti against the wall.
Exactly. So I know we're pressed for time. I just wanted to ask you, any advice you would give to anyone listening or watching this current episode, any advice you'd give them when they're starting out, something that you would like to give them?
Yes. And I've been waiting for years to be on a podcast just like this. Someone asked me this question. Are you ready?
Yes, go ahead.
So if I were to have done it the right way and I were sitting in whomever's listening, your shoes where I'm assuming you have a job, right? Maybe you're theorizing, you're reading, you're watching a lot of YouTube, you're listening to podcasts like this, and you want to go out on your own. My first piece of advice would be don't quit your day job. I would say to first understand and own fully that the next stage that you're about to go into is going to be a lot of work, and it will be more work than you can possibly imagine if you stick with it. So if you own that, if you understand that to the degree that you can, because you can't really fully until you're in it, but you understand it and then you own it and say, okay, yeah, I'm committed to whatever is coming my way. There's going to be sacrifice. Then I would say, there's a small period of research, don't spend all your time learning, because at some point you're going to have to experiment. I would say keep your day job, and at night or in the morning, whichever person you are, work on your business and put a plan in place and spend that time that you would normally spend watching Netflix or doing whatever you're doing. And again, if you have a family, it's harder. There's going to be greater sacrifice. Let them know, hey, there's going to be a sacrifice. Everybody gets rowing in the right direction, and you start working on your business until you land your first or third or fourth client. Now, this depends on how much revenue comes in, how many people you have to hire, all of that. If you are very risk averse, then you are going to want to go as long as you possibly can go without quitting your job. If you are okay with more risk, and if you're married and have a family and they are okay with more risk because they're part of this, if you're single and young, then it's your own risk tolerance, then you can quit your job, sooner. But either one, I would say keep your job and work on your business, and it could, things could pop off in 3 months, but it could also take 18 months. It could also take 3 years. It all comes down to your commitment level of knowing that this is going to be a sacrifice, and it's going to be years of sacrificing things that you normally have been doing, like traveling and going hiking or going to Disney or whatever it may be. I'm not saying you have to give it all up, but you will have to give up a lot. But having it on the side for as long as you possibly can and saving your money, that's going to make the biggest difference for the success that you will afford yourself once you go full time. Because once you go full time and you put your 2 weeks in, that paycheck goes away. Now the paycheck comes from you and the clients you have. And again, I'm saying, like I said at the start of this, if I would have done it the right way, I did not do any of that. And so therefore I have the battle scars to prove it. But I know people who did, and their lives were still stressful because of the nature of what you're doing, but they were markedly less stressful across the board. When you can put your 2 weeks notice in and know that you have X runway, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, whatever, how much money you have in the bank or clients you have signed to figure this thing out, your level of your probability of success is going to go way through the roof. Most small businesses fail after 3 years, maybe 5 years, and it's true. A lot of people start businesses they shouldn't start. That they really shouldn't be in them anyway. So that factors into that stat. But it's true. It's really hard because you might sign a client or two out of the gate and think, "Oh, this is good," and then after a couple of years, they're gone and there's no one else there, or traffic drops or whatever, depending on your business. So I would say, if you want to be successful past year 3, it's all about sustainability. And if you can just put the work in and hate your job, because once you leave your job, you don't have a job to hate. That becomes not the problem anymore. Now you have all these other problems that become the problem. So that's my piece of advice. And I'm glad that someone finally asked me, because this was the perfect time to say it.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that candid answer. I ask that of everyone, and you'll be surprised to know that's always the answer.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
We're all on the same page, because
great.
All of us did that. I mean, when I started Grata, I did cold turkey, man. I left my job and It was cold turkey. I understand exactly what you're talking about, the level of stress that you get. Yep. And I had a family of 4. So it was, and you were, and by the way, that one point that you made, and your significant other, and your family's with you on it. Yes. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs try to go out on their own, and they do this and they don't take into account their family. And you want to hear about divorce rates. That's kind of where that comes from. It's because you're not taking into account your significant other, the kids, everything that's involved. And
let me say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Very, very hyper specific.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anybody listening right now that's kind of upset with their life, they don't like how their job is panned out. They may even hate their job. They're married and maybe they have 2 kids or 1 kid and 1 on the way specifically. Okay. I'm speaking directly to you. This may not be the time to start your business, because if you look around, talk about divorce rate. If you look around at people and you see when they got divorced, it's usually around that second child comes into the mix. And generally it's because now the mother can't do it all. The one child they can take care of, but when there's 2, now the other person has to come in and help. Right. So things get real on the home front, and it's fine. It should. Like you gotta muscle through that, and you got to figure out your relationship changes and a lot of stuff, personal stuff that happens. But you can't be dealing with all that and all the stuff that you're going to deal with at work at the same time, because when you go home, they're, whoever's at home is going to say, we take precedence. This is a priority. And when you go to work, they're going to say, we take precedence. We're the priority. And you're not going to be able to choose. So specifically, if you are married with 1 on the way, two on the way, or 2, this is not the time. I mean, who am I as a red-blooded American capitalist, free marketist, to say, don't start a business? Yeah. This is the time to not start a business. This is the time to do your research at night while you're holding the baby, right? And talk to people. You know what? There's not enough work done on the front end, what I would call market research, where you say, okay, I'm going to start a software company. And what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to develop custom projects that are kind of like this, because this is what I like to do. I like to code this way. I like to use this. Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm kind of got my business plan down a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is go talk to some people who I think might be good prospects. And I'm just going to tell them, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business. If I started this kind of business, do you see any opportunity that you would hire me, or that something could happen here? And they would say, sure, we got this project and this project. Or they say, no, we don't have any of that. And you're going to learn a lot. I had a business mentor many, many, many years ago. It was a really old guy who made a lot of money, very wise. And we were having a conversation one day, and he was telling me about this guy who came to him and said, hey, I know you're an investor, and I know you. Will you invest in my battery store? I want to start a battery store. And he said, yes, but first, what I want you to do is go talk to everyone because he was currently in that business. Go talk to everybody that you are currently working with and tell them you're going to start a battery store. If I do, here's what it's going to look like. Would you buy from me? And then come back and tell me how many people say yes. And he did. He ended up investing, and that guy pulled the list up day one, called all those people, and a large portion of them gave him his business. Okay. So he was off to the races, and the investor was happy because the business is a success all right out of the gate. That's such wise action, right? Yeah. To just, you can spend a lot of time talking to people and really get a sense for, if you talk to 10 people or 20 people or 30 people like that, and you really have like lunch meetings or, or even a Zoom, but like you really get into the business and say, here's what I'm going to do. What's the need? They're going to open up and tell you, because there's nothing for them to lose, because they're not selling anything.
Yeah.
And then you're going to find out, oh, I know I can develop this specific thing for these specific people. And these people already told me they would hire me. So now, once my 2 kids are, 18 months or 2 years or whatever, I'm out of that little window. I'm going to go knock on their door and say, hey, we were with those conversations. How about we talk about open up my business, and you're going to have a lot more success.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lee, real quick, how do people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Lee Murray, and my podcast is Explorin Growth. You can find it through my website, which is Harvard like the school, MURRAY.com. So you really find me, everything's there.
Okay. Awesome. So for people who are watching, listening, we'll put all that in the description so that you can be able to find him. And again, have an opportunity when you start your business, if you are looking for some advice, guidance, or even, someone to help with your content creation, definitely Lee would be the guy to contact for that. And you will have all that in the description as well. I know, Lee, you're kind of over time. You have a meeting you have to go to. So
yes.
I definitely want to do this again. When you were talking about that last piece, I was like, oh, I have a question for you, but it's going to take about 30 minutes to finish that whole conversation.
Put the question in the comments and LinkedIn, and we'll answer it there.
Put the question in the comments. There you go. Yeah. But yeah, appreciate you jumping on the podcast, in the short time span that you had available. I really appreciate you coming on here and giving some really great advice to the listeners and the viewers that are on there and are on here. And man, really appreciate it. And again, love to have you back on to finish the conversation. So
it was a great conversation. Thanks for having me on, and I for sure will come back.
Awesome. Well, everyone listening, again, Learn to Build a Business podcast. We'll have his description or we'll have his information in the description. And then also, like, follow, subscribe, all of that, so that you can get notified of all the other podcasts that are coming out after as well. So thanks again for watching, listening, and we'll see you guys in the next podcast.